Welcome back again. In this last lesson of this section, I'm going to show you how to use a slider, or what we call a seek bar. So it's going to be a very simple lesson, and I'm going to get started with in my Android Studio. Here I'm going to make a new project. Let's call it seek bar application. And in my seek bar application, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my layout, and in the layout I'm actually going to add a seek bar. So this is my seek bar. I don't need that hello world. Let's make my seek bar a lot larger, maybe like this. And I'm going to set it horizontally and vertically in the center. And then I'm going to say this is called my seek bar. And that's all I have to do in the interface builder. Let's go to our code. Now in my Kotlin file, in my onCreate, I'm going to go ahead and say my seek bar dot progress. Let's say we put it at, let's say 20. So this is the current progress of it. But if the current progress of it is 20, what is the minimum and the maximum of it? The minimum of it is always 0. It never changes. So if you want to change that, you actually have to map the value manually. For instance, if you want to have a seek bar that goes between 10 to 20, you have to make a seek bar that goes between 0 to 10 and then add 10 to every value that you get. But in this case, I don't really care about that. I want to keep it at 0, but I want to make the seek bar dot maximum to be, let's say, 100. So my seek bar goes between 0 to 100, and the current progress of it is 20. Now, the next thing that we need to do, and it's a very important thing, is we need to know when the seek bar basically changes. So I'm going to say my seek bar dot set on seek bar change listener, which is actually a different kind of object to what we have seen in the past. Because in the past we have had these listeners, and the listeners would do things for us. This time our listener actually has built-in functions to it. And for now, let's just follow me along. I will explain in the future lessons what is an object, which is basically a singleton or a static object. We will come to it in the future and we'll see it in far more details. However, I'm going to say the object is a seek bar dot on seek, not in, on seek bar change listener. And then here we have all of our potential lessons. Now, when we are doing this listener, we actually have to implement some of its methods. And that's why it's actually giving us a little warning. It's saying you haven't implemented everything. And the ones that we have to implement, let me get myself a little bit of a formatting in here, is these three things. One of them is on progress changed. So this is one of the functions. So this means the one that gets called every time that the seek bar actually changes. Then on the other one is actually on track touch. That's the start of the touch. And then on track stop touch. So these are the three different objects that we have to include in here. Sometimes the errors, they get stuck in the editor. If that did happen, you can actually go to build and you can do a clean project. When you do a clean project, it automatically gets rid of those kinds of errors. Not every type of error, but that type of errors that are kind of stuck in the editor. So now that we have this, let's see what do they actually mean. The first one, on progress change, is probably the one that we primarily care about. And this is the one which is basically going to show us what is the current progress. So I'm actually going to go ahead in here and say this is basically seek bar. This one, the first value is basically the new value. So this is the current progress. And this last one, it doesn't really matter for most cases. This is something that's called a user initiated, which means whether this value was actually initiated by the user or the seek bar is actually happening automatically, like when you are playing an audio and you're using a seek bar to show the current progress of the audio file. So in any case, what I actually want to see is I want to see the current progress, which is very simple. I want to go ahead and say toast dot make text, and I want to make text here, and I want to say show me val is, and then a $sign current progress, and then toast dot long, and then finally show. just like what we have done before as well. Now let's see what's the error in here. The error is with the context, and that's actually a good thing that happened in here. So I'm going to say this at main activity. So here we are inside a listener and we are not inside our main, so we cannot just use this. We actually have to say what is this referring to, because let me explain this in a little bit, even though this is a topic that we get to it in our OOP later in, I think, section 7 or 8. This usually refers to whoever owns the current function, which usually is this guy, main activity, or the activity basically. But in this situation, this actually belongs to this function, which actually belongs to this object. And this object is not of the type activity, and that's why it cannot do things such as toast. So it's asking us, tell us exactly where you think this is actually referring to. I'm saying this is actually main activity, and with that the error goes away. And the last thing I'm going to do before I run my application, I'm actually going to get rid of these two, because if you keep the to do, is actually going to crash your application. This is basically a way to tell yourself, I haven't yet done this part. So I'm going to get rid of that to do and this other one. You could do things in here if you cared about your application, knowing when the tracking begins and when the tracking ends. In this case, I'm only interested in when the tracking actually changes, so I'm not going to add anything in here. But there might be situations that you want to know when the user begins tracking and when they end the tracking. So I'm actually going to go in here, run the application, and I'm going to load up my emulator, see what I got. And in here, if I pull this, we can see the value is actually changing the way we were expecting it. So that's about it with the seek bars. We learned how we actually set up matters such as, maximums or progress bars or the current progress, as well as how do we call different functions of it. Usually you care about this particular function on progress change, but there might be situations where you would need the start and end. And let's keep it up to here with this lesson. For the next section, we're going to actually build a new interface using everything that we learned together. Before you go to that, you might want to do a quick recap of everything we did in this section. Let's do that, and I'll see you in the next lesson, the beginning of the next section.